Hello everyone, History with Hilbert here, and today I'm making a video about the Anglo-Saxons, by request as well as because I thought it would be an interesting thing to cover in a video. Now my previous video, if you haven't seen it, was about Old English, and it was a very successful video. I did it with one of my friends, Kevin from Learnende Old English, and we've had a lot of new subscribers come in from this video. So if you are one of these new subscribers, I'd like to wish you a warm and hearty welcome to History with Hilbert, to the channel, to the community. So in this one, I will be having a look at the Anglo-Saxons, where they came from and where the different groups settled in England. Here is a map that I'm going to be using to show where the different tribes came from. Now, a few points about this map before we begin. It's not accurate. Yes, it's accurate for the present day, but for around 450 to 500 AD, it isn't accurate. First of all, you see here in the Netherlands that there is this big body of water in the centre of the Netherlands, which was called the Zuiderzee. It's now called het IJsselmeer, but it used to be called the Zuiderzee, which means the Southern Sea. And it's basically this big inland sea, obviously salt water, that was in the middle of the Netherlands. Now, in the 1920s, I believe, they built a massive dike across the top, so that the sea became fresh water, and then it was renamed het IJsselmeer, meer meaning lake. Now, that's obviously all well and good, but back in the Anglo-Saxon era, the Zuiderzee didn't exist in that kind of form. It's believed that it was more small rivers, maybe some canals and lakes, marshland, rather than this big expanse of water, that you could sail across in a ship. And it was actually only in the 12th century that excessive flooding created this inland sea, because as you all know probably, the Netherlands is a large part of the Netherlands is actually underneath sea level, and it's all very flat, so especially back in the early days it was incredibly prone to flooding. As well as this, where I'm going to place the Saxons, which I'm going to do in a minute, in this, yes, they did come from there, but in this era we also see that the Saxons actually moved westwards, and they appear to mix with the Frisians, who lived in the northern, the coastal areas of the Netherlands. So we see that this kind of mixing goes on, and because of this mixing, it can become very hard to define when something stops being Frisian or stops being Saxon, and when something becomes the other. So that's something that we need to keep in mind when we are looking at this map. Now, a final thing about the map that I'm using, and where it might divulge from the truth, is that the map will show the different Anglo-Saxon tribes crossing over the sea to get to the specific places in England. But a lot of scholars think that this isn't likely to have happened. Like, for example, the Vikings just went straight across the North Sea to raid Northumbria and Lindisfarne, that kind of thing. But they think with the Anglo-Saxons that actually what would have happened is that great groups of people would have moved inland, down the coast, on foot, and then gathered in Frisia, and then from there, where the crossing is relatively safe, just across the northern tip of the English Channel, that they then would have crossed over by boat and then moved on to wherever they were going to settle in England. Okay, so these are the different tribes. We obviously have the Jutes, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Frisians. Now I've placed them as accurately as I can to where they would have lived on in the period. Now, these tribes all have certain things in common. For example, they're all Germanic in culture, and they're all seen as the North Sea Germanic. That is their name that they are known as collectively, as well as the Ingevons. They're all pagan in this period. There wouldn't have been any Christians here back in the day, because this was all before they had been converted. And as well as this, they all spoke Ingevonic languages. So they all would have been able to understand each other. Perhaps they would laugh at each other because they had funny accents to their minds, but they would have been able to understand each other. And although this is all well and good, it makes it more difficult for historians and linguists trying to see if someone was a Frisian or a Saxon. It's not always as clear-cut. It can be quite hard to see exactly how different they were and where and which aspects. Now, the Saxons, they sailed down to the south of England. The Angles obviously go As I said, they probably would have gone through Frisia and then moved, but this is just a general indication of where they went. So we see that the Saxons settle in the south in Wessex, Sussex, Middlesex, and Essex. And in fact, the name Saxon comes from the type of knife that they would have used, which was called a sax. And in fact, Wessex comes from West Saxe, which means the West Saxons. So the Wessex is where the West Saxons would have settled, Sussex, the South Saxons, Middlesex, the Middle Saxons, and Essex, the East Saxons. Fun bit of trivia there. The Angles, they settled mostly along the eastern seaboard, so Northumbria, Mercia, and East Anglia, which is all on the eastern side of England. And the Jutes are believed to have settled in the very southeastern tip, which was in Kent. Now, the Frisians are a bit harder to place, and whether they even crossed over with the other Anglo-Saxons is a much debated topic even today in the Anglo-Saxon scholarly tradition, because with the other three, we all have clear sources naming each one and archaeological evidence. Although with the Frisians, it's rather more difficult to pinpoint. And the reason for this is that they didn't develop any of their own kingdoms. With the Jutes, they developed Kent. The Saxons developed Wessex and Middlesex and Essex, for example. And the Anglians settled in Northumbria, Mercia, and East Anglia. And they wrote this down afterwards. But none of these kingdoms were formed solely by Frisians, which might be why we don't hear anything about them. Now, evidence has been found, however, which is also debated by different archaeologists and historians, but there is, to my mind at least, feasible evidence that they were in Britain, in places such as East Anglia, Northumbria and Mercia, so a spread of the different kingdoms. And there have also been other theories that other tribes actually got involved, such as the Franks, which would have been slightly more south of the Frisians in the modern-day Normandy, that kind of coastal area is possibly where they would have crossed over. For example, in Kent, I believe you see a lot of Frankish Merovingian influences. You have then the Franks and the Batavians, who were also an old tribe living in the southern Netherlands and in sort of the Belgian region. And I believe also the Huns, because I believe that there is a historian named Caitlin Green, if I'm not mistaken, and she has a whole theory with evidence to support the fact that the Huns might have taken part in the migrations of the Anglo-Saxon era. Now, if we have a look at the modern-day countries, we can see where they came from. Now, the Jutes would have come from northern Denmark, and the Angles from the region of the Dano-German border. One of the ideas about why the Angles get their name is from, I believe, a Roman emperor who thought they were likened to angels and therefore accidentally said, they are Angeles. Which is Latin for angel, I believe. But I'm rather sceptical of this theory because I think the name Angle, or Angloi rather, is around a lot earlier than this supposed happening. And another theory about how they get their name is that the region where they lived in this southern area of Denmark looked rather a lot like a fisherman's hook. And in English, if you know the word angler, that is a fisher. So it's the same root word as angle, which would have been the fisherman's hook in an older Germanic language. Now I see that the Saxons would have come from northwestern Germany. There is still a large province of Germany called Saxony, and the eastern Netherlands as well. And for the Frisians, they basically came from the Netherlands. There is also a province in the northern Netherlands called Friesland, and also one in Germany, I believe, called Ostfriesland, which is East Frisia. And there are also Frisian Islands and North Friesland, which is off the Danish and German coast, right in the north there. Now, it's important to remember when looking at this map that this is a map of today, and none of these countries would have existed in the 5th century. In fact, I don't think any of the ideas for these countries even existed in the 5th century. That's a much later idea, this of Dutch, German, Danish, English. People wouldn't have thought of themselves as that. I'm not even sure if people would have thought of themselves as Saxons, Jutes, or Frisians back then. It's a very different concept of who you were. It's more not where your father came from, but what he did that mattered back in these times. Now, here we see a map of where the different tribes would have settled in England, and they formed a number of kingdoms. Now, here on the chart, I think I went through this on the other one as well, we see that the darker blue colour is of the Jutes, and the Jutish kingdom that we know of was Kent, which was right in the southeast of England. In light blue, we have the Angles, who settled the eastern seaboard, which would have been the kingdom of Northumbria, which is where Bede is from. He's very pro-Angle, so that's how we know about the Angles. We also have Mercia, which was in sort of the Midlands going right down to London, which is where I think it bordered on Kent, East Anglia and Wessex, and East Anglia as well for the Angles. And the Saxons we see more in the south of the country in all those modern-day counties ending in sex. And these purple arrows are where there are possible examples of Frisian settlements. Now, we're not sure about all of these again, and it is debatable, but I'd rather like to think that they did come across the channel and they did help in the Anglo-Saxon invasions. Now, a lot of the suspected Frisian settlements begin in Fries or Frisch, so either with an I or a Y. Because this is indicating that something belonged to the Frisian. So, for example, we see here Frieston. There's one in East Anglia, which is spelt with an I, and then another one in, I believe that will be Yorkshire, spelt with a Y. And this ton at the end indicates village. So this suggests that Frieston, no matter how it's spelt like that, would mean something along the lines of village of the Frisian or village of the Frisians, which to my mind is good evidence for why there could be Frisians in this time. And we also see evidence for them in other places as well. Alright guys, so this has been another video with History with Hilbert. In this one I was looking at the Anglo-Saxons, where they came from, where they settled in England. Please let me know how you thought this video went. If you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up and write in the comments what you thought. Alright guys, I hope to see you soon. Thanks very much for watching. This has been History with Hilbert, and I'm signing off.